Hey peeps, read aloud. Whew, today's gonna be a good day because remember that the last time that we read yesterday, Jacob was heading up to the locked room that had someone named Victor in it. So I'm super excited to find out more about Victor and why this room has to be locked. Does he lock it from the inside or is he locked in? And if so, why? Can't wait to find out. All right, let me share my screen with you and we'll get started. And I need to set my timer. How are you all doing today? Good? Do you guys like having read aloud one of the very first things? Yes, no? Oh man. Okay. Starting my timer. Okay, so we stopped at a really good spot. It was this break here, and he's heading up to Victor's room right now, okay? That's where we're at. All right, timer is on. Let me get started. I sauntered into the house and up the stairs like I had business there and didn't care who knew it. Reaching the second floor unobserved, I crept to the room at the end of the hall and tried the door. It was locked. I knocked, but there was no answer. Glancing over my shoulder to make sure no one was watching, I ran my hand along the top of the door frame. Sure enough, I found a key. Remember that Enoch is the person who told him to look above the door for the key. Remember that from yesterday? All right, I'm sorry, I can't get comfortable right now. Ugh. I'm like, well, probably because I'm sitting on the floor. That's probably why. Okay. I unlocked the door and slipped inside. It was like any other bedroom in the house. There was a dresser, a wardrobe, a vase of flowers on the nightstand. Late morning sun shone through drawn curtains, the color of mustard, throwing such yellow light everywhere that the whole room seemed encased in amber. Only then did I notice a young man lying in the bed, his eyes closed and mouth slightly open, half hidden behind a lace curtain. I froze, afraid I'd wake him. I recognized him from Miss Peregrine's albums, though I hadn't seen him at meals or around the house, and we'd never been introduced. In the picture, he'd been asleep in bed, just as he was now. Had he been quarantined, infected with some sleeping sickness? Oh, that's ironic, considering what's going on right now around the world. Was Enoch trying to get me sick, too? Hello, I whispered. Are you awake? He didn't move. I put a hand on his arm and shook him gently. His head lolled to one side. Oh my goodness, I don't think I would go and touch him. I think I'd be terrified right now. Ooh, so here's a picture of the room. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. And if you can't tell, it looks like this is a mirror, and you can see the bed in the mirror. And if you look really closely, there's Victor right there. He's sleeping in the bed. What's up with Victor? I don't know. Kind of scary though. I don't like scary stories, so I hope nothing bad's gonna happen. Then something terrible occurred to me. To test a theory, I held my hand in front of his mouth. I couldn't feel him breathe. Oh my goodness. My finger brushed his lips, which were cold as ice. Shocked, I pulled my hand away. Ooh. Then I heard footsteps and spun around to see Bronwyn in the doorway. You ain't supposed to be in here, she hissed. He's dead, I said. Bronwyn's eyes went to the boy and her face puckered. That's Victor. Suddenly it came to me where I'd seen his face. He was the boy lifting the boulder in my grandfather's pictures. Victor was Bronwyn's brother. There was no telling how long he might have been dead. As long as the loop kept looping, it could be 50 years and only look like a day. Oh my goodness. You guys, this is wild. What happened to him? I asked. Maybe I'll wake old Victor up, came a voice from behind us, and you can ask him yourself. It was Enoch. He came in and shut the door. Ooh, do you guys remember that Enoch's peculiarity is that he can take life from one thing and put it into another? Oh my goodness. This is getting really creepy, you guys. Bronwyn beamed at him through welling tears. Would you wake him? Oh, please, Enoch. I shouldn't, he said. I'm running low on hearts as it is, and it takes a right lot of them to rise up a human being, even for just a minute. Bronwyn crossed to the dead boy and began to smooth his hair with her fingers. Please, she begged. It's been ages since we talked to Victor. Well, I do have some cow hearts pickling in the basement, he said, pretending to consider it. But I hate to use inferior ingredients. Fresh is always better. Bronwyn began to cry in earnest. One of her tears fell onto the boy's jacket, and she hurried to wipe it away with her sleeve. Don't get so choked, Enoch said. You know I can't stand it. Anyway, it's cruel waking Victor. He likes it where he is. And where's that? I said. Who knows? But whenever we rouse him for a chat, he seems in a dreadful hurry to get back. Oh my God. What's cruel is you toying with Bronwyn like that and tricking me, I said. And if Victor's dead, why don't you just bury him? Bronwyn flashed me a look of utter derision. Then we'd never get to see him, she said. Oh my gosh, you guys. Are you guys hearing this? That stings, mate, said Enoch. I only mentioned coming up here because I wanted you to have all the facts, like, I'm on your side. Yeah? What are the facts, then? How did Victor die? Bronwyn looked up. He got killed by an... Ow! She squealed as Enoch pinched the back of her arm. Hush, he cried. It ain't for you to tell. That is ridiculous, I said. If neither of you will tell me, just go ask Miss Peregrine. Enoch took a quick stride towards me, eyes wide. Oh no, you mustn't do that. Yeah? Why mustn't I? The bird don't like us talking about Victor, he said. It's why she wears black all the time, you know. Anyway, she can't find out we've been in here. She'll hang us by our pinky toes. As if on cue, we heard the unmistakable sound of Miss Peregrine limping up the stairs. Bronwyn turned white and dashed past me out the door. But before Enoch could escape, I blocked his path. Out of the way, he hissed. Tell me what happened to Victor. I can't. Then tell me about Raid the Village. I can't tell you that neither. He tried to shove past me, but when he realized he couldn't, he gave up. All right, just shut the door and I'll whisper it to you. I closed it just as Miss Peregrine was reaching the landing. We stood with our ears pressed to the door for a moment, listening for a sign that we'd been spotted. The headmistress's footsteps came halfway down the hall towards us, then stopped. Another door creaked open, then shut. She's gone into her room, Enoch whispered. So, I said, raid the village. Looking like he was sorry he'd brought it up, he motioned me away from the door. I followed, leaning down so he could whisper into my ear. Like I said, it's a game we play. It works just like the name says. You mean you actually raid the village? Smash it up, chase people around, take what we like, burn things down. It's all a good laugh. But that's terrible. We got to practice our skills somehow, don't we? In case we ever need to defend ourselves. Otherwise, we'd get rusty. Plus, there's rules. We ain't allowed to kill anybody. Just scare them up a bit like. And if someone does get hurt, well, they're back right as rain the next day and don't remember nothing about it. Does Emma play too? Nah, she's like you, says it's evil. Well, it is. He rolled his eyes. You two deserve each other. What's that supposed to mean? He rose up to his 5'4" height and poked a finger into my chest. It means you better not get all high and mighty with me, mate, because if we didn't raid the village once in a while, most of this lot would have gone off their heads ages ago. He went to the door and put his hand on the knob and then turned back to face me. And if you think we're wicked, wait till you see them. Them who? What is everyone talking about? He held up one finger to shush me, then went out. I was alone again. My eyes were drawn to the body on the bed. So, okay, he's talking about raid the village. So it sounds like they go into the village and basically like destroy it, set things on fire, scare people. And he says it's because they have to stay like, they have to like practice their powers or whatever. But remember that each day the loop happens and the people don't remember what happened the day before because they go back in time. So they can do that and no one remembers it. So it's kind of a weird thing, but to them it makes sense because they say they have to, let's see, how did he put it? Practice their skills. So I wonder why they need to practice their skills. It reminds me of a reading lesson that we did a couple weeks ago where I said that sometimes you have to learn alongside the character. I feel like we're really learning alongside Jake right now. We're learning things about them at the same time he's learning about them. He didn't know about Raid the Village. Enoch had to tell him. So Enoch is also telling us about Raid the Village. You guys see that? All right, so I was alone again. My eyes were drawn to the body on the bed. What happened to you, Victor? Maybe he'd gone crazy and killed himself, I thought. Gotten so sick of this cheerful but futureless eternity that he'd guzzled rat poison or taken a dive off a cliff. Or maybe it was them, those other dangers Miss Peregrine had alluded to. I stepped into the hall and just started down towards the stairs when I heard Miss Peregrine's voice behind a half-closed door. I dove into the nearest room and stayed hidden until she limped past me and down the stairs. Then I noticed a pair of boots at the front of a crispy made bed. Emma's boots. I was in her bedroom. Along one wall was a chest of drawers and a mirror. On the other, a writing desk with a chair tucked neatly underneath. It was the room of a neat girl with nothing to hide, or so it seemed, until I found a hat box just inside the closet. It was tied up with a string, and in grease pencil across the front was written, "Private. Correspondence of Emma Bloom. Do not open." You think he's going to open it? We'll find out. It was like waving red underwear at a bull. I sat down with the box in my lap and untied the string. It was packed with 100 or more letters, all from my grandfather. My heart picked up speed. This was exactly the kind of gold mine I'd hope I'd find in the ruined house. Sure, I felt bad about snooping, but if people here insisted on keeping things secret, well, I'd just have to find stuff out for myself. I wanted to read them all, but was afraid someone would walk in on me, so I thumbed through them quickly to get an overview. Many were dated from the early 1940s, during Grandpa Portman's time in the Army. A random sampling revealed them to be long and sappy, full of declarations of his love and awkward descriptions of Emma's beauty in my grandpa's then broken English. "You are pretty like flower, have good smell also, may I pick?" In one, he'd enclosed a picture of himself, posing atop a bomb with a cigarette dangling from his lips. Over time, his letters grew shorter and less frequent. By the 1950s, there was maybe one a year. The last was dated April 1963. Inside the envelope was no letter, just a few pictures. Two were of Emma, snapshots she'd sent him that he'd sent back. The first was from early on, a jokey pose to answer his, of her peeling potatoes and pretending to smoke one of Miss Peregrine's pipes. The next one was sadder, and I had imagined she'd sent it after my father had failed to write for a while. The last photo, the last thing he'd ever sent her, in fact, showing my grandfather at middle age holding a little girl. That is sad looking. Oh my goodness. She sent a kiss. He did. Oh. So that's the grandfather, middle age, and he's holding a little girl. I would assume is probably his mom, Jacob's mom. And it says, "This is why." I had to stare at the last picture for a minute before I realized who the little girl was. It was my Aunt Susie. Oh, not his mom, his aunt. Maybe 4 years old then. After that, there were no more letters. I wondered how much longer Emma had continued writing to my grandfather without receiving a reply, and what he'd done with her letters. Thrown them out? Stashed them somewhere? Surely it had to be one of those letters that my father and aunt had found as kids, that made them think their father was a liar and a cheat. How wrong they were. Oh, do you guys remember that Jacob's dad was telling him that they thought that Grandpa Portman had cheated on their grandma or their mom, and because they found these letters from Emma, but really he wasn't like seeing someone else. It was just Emma sending them to him, but Grandpa Portman is out of the loop, so he's getting older, and Emma's staying the same age, and Grandpa Portman's moving on with his life. Okay, he has kids now, then he eventually has Jacob as a grandchild, so he's moving on with his life. I heard a throat clear behind me, and turned to see Emma glaring from the doorway. I scrambled to gather the letters, my face flushing, but it was too late. I was caught. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be in here. I'm well aware of that, she said, but by all means, don't let me interrupt your reading. She stamped over to her chest of drawers, yanked one out, and threw it clattering to the floor. While you're at it, why don't you have a look through my knickers, too? I'm really, really sorry, I repeated. I never do things like this. Oh, I shouldn't wonder. Too busy peeping in ladies' windows, I suppose. She towered over me, shaking with anger. While I struggled to fit all the letters back into the box. There's a system, you know. Just give them here, you're mucking everything up. She sat down and pushed me aside, emptying the box onto the floor and sorting the letters into piles with the speed of a postal worker. Thinking it best to shut my mouth, I watched meekly while she worked. While she calmed a little, she said, so you want to know about Abe and me, is that it? Because you could have just asked. I didn't want to pry. Rather a moot point now, wouldn't you say? I guess. So, what is it you want to know? I thought about it. I really wasn't sure where to start. Just, what happened? All right then, we'll skip all the nice bits and go right to the end. It's simple, really. He left. He said he loved me and promised to come back one day, but he never did. But he had to go, didn't he, to fight? Had to? I don't know. He said he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he sat out the war while his people were being hunted and killed. Said it was his duty. I suppose duty meant more to him than I did. Anyhow, I waited. I waited and worried through that whole bloody war, thinking every letter that came was a death notice. Then, when the war was finally over, he said he couldn't possibly come back. Said he'd go stark raving. Said he'd learned how to defend himself in the army, and he didn't need a nanny like the bird to look after him anymore. He was going to America to make a home for us, and then he'd send for me. So I waited more. I waited so long that if I'd actually gone to be with him, I would have been 40 years old. By then, he'd taken up with some commoner, and that, as they say, was that. I'm sorry, I had no idea. It's an old story. I don't drag it out much anymore. You blame him for being stuck here? I said. She gave me a sharp look. Who says I'm stuck? Then she sighed. No, I don't blame him. Just miss him is all. Still, every day. She finished sorting the letters. There you have it, she said, clapping the lid on them. The entire history of my love life in a dusty box in the closet. She drew a deep breath and then shut her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. For a moment, I could almost see the old woman hiding behind her smooth features. My grandfather had trampled her poor, pining heart, and the wound was still raw, even these many years later. I thought of putting my arm around her, but somehow something stopped me. Here was this beautiful, funny, fascinating girl who, miracle of miracles, really seemed to like me. But now I understood that it wasn't me she liked. She was heartbroken for someone else, and I was merely a stand-in for my grandfather. That's enough to give anyone pause. I don't care who you are. I know guys who are grossed out by the idea of dating a friend's ex. By that standard, dating your grandfather's ex would probably be incest. The next thing I knew, Emma's hand was on my arm. Then her head was on my shoulder, and I could feel her chin tracking slowly towards my face. This was kiss me body language, if there ever was such a thing. In a minute, our faces would be level, and I'd have to choose between locking lips or seriously offending her by pulling away. And I'd already offended her once. It's not that I didn't want to, more than anything I did, but the idea of kissing her 2 feet from a box of obsessively well-preserved love letters from my grandfather made me feel weird and nervous. Then her cheek was against mine, and I knew it was now or never. So I said the first mood-killing thing that popped into my head. Is there something going on between you and Enoch? She pulled away instantly, looking at me like I'd suggested we dine on puppies. What? No! Where on earth did you get a twisted idea like that? From him. He sounds kind of bitter when he talks about you, and I get the distinct impression he doesn't want me around, like I'm honing in on his game or something. Her eyes kept getting wider. First of all, he doesn't have any game to hone in on, I assure you of that. He's a jealous fool and a liar. Is he? Is he which? A liar. She narrowed her eyes. Why? What kind of nonsense has he been spouting? Emma, what happened to Victor? She looked shocked. Then shaking her head, she muttered, that selfish boy. There is something no one here is telling me, and I want to know what it is. I can't, she said. That's all I've been hearing. I can't talk about the future. You can't talk about the past. Miss Peregrine has us all tied up in knots. My grandfather's last wish was for me to come here and find out the truth. Doesn't that mean anything? She took my hand and brought it to her lap and looked down at it. She seemed to be searching for the right words. You're right, she said finally. There is something. Tell me. Not here, she whispered. Tonight. We arranged to meet late that night, when my dad and Miss Peregrine would be asleep. Emma insisted it was the only way, because the walls had ears, and it was impossible to slip off together during the day without arousing suspicion. To complete the illusion that we had nothing to hide, we spent the rest of the afternoon hanging out in the yard in full view of everyone, and when the sun began to set, I walked back to the bog alone. Okay, our timer went off a few pages ago, so I'm going to stop here because we're at a good break. But let's be brief about what just happened. So he is learning more about, he learned more about Victor. Victor died, and they still have his body up in that locked room, which is kind of weird, but Enoch, it sounds like, has brought him back to life before, but they don't do it very often, I would assume. And it didn't say exactly how long he had been dead, but because they go back to the same, like, they go back in time, they only live in the same 24 hours over and over and over again. His body hasn't, like, gotten bad or anything because it's new when the time goes back. I don't know. It's kind of weird to think about. But so then he saw the box of letters from his grandfather in Emma's room, and he looked through it, which he shouldn't have done, but he does want answers, and that's why he was there. So I kind of see why he did it. He saw that his grandfather and Emma were writing back and forth for a while, and then it kind of like died off, and then it stopped when Grandpa Portman started having a family. And so we learned that. And then it sounds like the next thing we're going to hear is Emma's going to tell Jacob kind of what everyone's not telling him. So he's figuring out that there's something about them that he doesn't know. And no one will tell him because everyone says that they can't say it. There's some type of secret that we don't know and that Jacob doesn't know. So Emma's going to tell us, hopefully, after the next break, because they're going to plan to meet when everyone goes to sleep. So we'll find out what happens next time we read. Hopefully we get some answers. Hopefully Jacob gets some answers, because I know he's been really confused about and just frustrated that there's things. He knows there's things he doesn't know, but no one will tell him. So that can be really frustrating, right? Yeah. All right. We had a great reading time today. We learned a lot. Finally, some things are starting to happen, because I know we went through a spot where it was just a lot of like description and not a lot was happening. So I think we're getting to the part where like there's going to be a big problem in the book, because up until now we haven't really had a huge problem yet. So I hope that we're getting there soon. I hope that you are still enjoying the book, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.